I've got my life story out. I mean, it's rather fab. I'm doing the shows, and obviously, it's a bit like things just come out of the blue, you know. If you go way back, it all starts off with me learning to play guitar, and obviously trying to form a group. And there were several years of that, and rock and roll, and the music of the time was skiffle and things like that. Then Elvis Presley made it, and I started to get into this idea of American music, and I think that's where I then formed a little group on the council estate, which led to meeting Don Powell in a Bilston group, which is a neighbouring town to Wolverhampton. And then when we formed that, Don and I had got this idea to form a group like the Beatles, to have 4 people in the group. So Don and I linked together and left that group. But we knew a guy called Noddy Holder, and he used to sing in Steve Breton and the Mavericks. He was, but he wasn't the main singer, you see, but he did sing a bit, but he was great with talking to an audience. So I made a note of him to ask him if he'd be interested, and I met him one day, quite by accident, outside a department store in Wolverhampton called James Beattie's, and I asked him if he'd be interested in being a singer. And he said, I'll think about that. I said, well, I've got this idea. I want a group with 3 lead guitarists, he said. He went, oh, yeah, I like the sound of that. Yeah, that's different. Oh, yeah. So I knew he could play lead, so I asked him that. And then Jim Lee, the bass player, he'd only just come out of school, and he was looking to, he knew the group I was in before we'd done, so he thought he was joining, being auditioned. We auditioned him, and I hadn't seen anybody play bass like him, so we came together and we had a rehearsal in a pub, and we played a song all of us knew, and there was a moment of looking at each other that something good is happening here very, very quickly. And then from that point onwards, I reckon we spent quite a few years we got a local agent working pubs and clubs like everybody did, and Mecca ballrooms and town halls and all that sort of stuff, and then going to Germany, and then went to the Bahamas, and there's all sorts of funny stories. Well, I write about it, you see, in my book, you see, about the journey and how it develops. And then we met this man who was to change our lives, and basically we were in London and we were recording a couple of tracks for a bloke, and he said, oh, I think you're pretty good. You need London management. He said, you need London management. He said, I know somebody. And that somebody led to Chas Chandler. He saw us in a very pokey club and loved us and signed us. And it took a year or more till we had our first massive start, you know. But he saw in us a breath of fresh air in business. Chas was in a band anyway, the Animals, and he managed Hendrix, and he knew what a good tune was, and he produced us and he guided us, and he was into the clothes I wore. You know, I was so much into that, you know, and he loved all that. He's just, you know, presentation and looking great on top of the pops and the fun of it, really. And really, I remember when Nod and Jim, when they started to write, because at first it wasn't our own song, you see, it was Get Down and Get With It, but the next one became number 1, and Jim played violin, you see, and Nod and Jim were just strumming and got this idea, and he strummed it to Chas, and he went, phew. He said, I think you've got your first hit, you know, not your first hit, but your first major hit after the other one. He said, actual fact, I think you've just written a number 1.
Wow.
And you know how true that was, because when we recorded it, I played it to my sister on an old Dansette record player that we used to have in those days. And it was just an acetate of the song. And my sister went all tingly and funny. She said, oh, listen, really affects me, that song. And it was just like, it just flew into the charts and started our run of number 1s. And I guess we were ready to take on everybody, you know. A band from the Midlands, you know, grows up in council houses, works hard, becomes successful, and builds a career of 4 or 5 years of hit records, you know, that's what we had. And from that, really, I mean, at 71 years of age now, it's amazing that I'm still doing it and playing to thousands of people. I frequently play to large venues abroad to a lot of people who are very nostalgic about 70s, and it keeps me in something I really love doing because I've always been an entertainer, and to have great songs and entertain is the way forward. And I've wrote about it in my book. You see,
I was going to ask you, what's the title of the book?
It's called So Here It Is, which is the first few lines of the main chorus in the Christmas song. And it goes, so here it is, Mary. Yeah. So we call it So Here It Is, meaning here's the autobiography. And then the subheading is How the Boy from Wolverhampton Rocked the World. And I've got a forward from Nod, and I've got an afterward from Noel Gallagher, who says, if there hadn't been Slade, there wouldn't be Oasis. So, such a lovely bit he put in there, you know, as a genuine fan, which then appeals to his generation, doesn't it, you know. But I've written a story about not just glitz and glam, but I've written about being born in 1946, being born just after the war, Mum and Dad, you know, various things going on. Mum's got a child out of wedlock. They meet in an ammunition factory. They have this incredible wedding, which I don't want to say too much because it's a really interesting story. And Mum worked for a war cabinet minister, sworn to secrecy. And then growing up in a council house. I think what's important with the book is living the way we did in those days, where everybody had mostly the same things. Nobody had cars, nobody had TV, and nobody had a telephone. Most people couldn't use one, you know, didn't know how to. But we grew up in an environment of playing in woods and not being scared. And, you know, the houses the back doors were left open at night, you know, you just came in, you know, because they weren't concerned about somebody robbing you. And then I take you through all that with school, rejection, and then I take you through the actual first chance to go professional and grow my hair. And then I take you through to meeting Chaz, into the success. And then I take you through becoming massively depressed for 2 years. Seriously depressed I was. Until I got well, and that took some time, so it's a good story to tell people. And then when I got well, I had a stroke on stage. So that felt like my career was over when that happened, and it wasn't, but it felt like it. So I take you through what it's like to have that happen to you on stage, and the recovery, and how it was, and I think really depression was in the family with my mum, you see. Mum's story alone will have you in tears because it's some story, Mum, about what she was carrying with guilt and having a child at the wrong time in the Victorian days, you know, and the taboo. I wanted to write all that because I think it makes for a good read in a sense of different problems that we have these days. And I know for a fact that I've already helped somebody because he's read the depression story and he's gone back to his psychiatrist. He's made the phone call because he said I gave him hope when he read that I'd been like that for 2 years and then got well. So I don't know. I wrote it because my wife says you want to write a book which is truthful and it sounds like you, and that's what I wrote. I thought, well, you know what? I want people not just to say, oh yes, he had 6 number ones. We all know that, or yes, it was glitz and glam. Yes, it's all that as well, but it's also the realness of the truth of life and how I centre my thoughts now of what's really important, you know, and that is family, the bedrock of your life, you know, the grandkids, the real joys. Not when people say, oh, you must be worth a fortune, you must be very rich. And I said, you know what? I've never been very rich in money ever been rich. I said, but I'm rich in family. And for me, that's better than money.